The House has passed legislation that would ban assault weapons for the first time since 2004. It is likely doomed, of course, in the Senate, but Democrats are not giving up. Yesterday's vote follows a hard-charging hearing in the House Oversight Committee where gun manufacturers were called on by Committee Chair Carolyn Maloney to take responsibility for, as she put it, profiting off the blood of innocent Americans killed in mass shootings. Maloney unveiled a report that shows 5 major gun makers made $1 billion from semi-automatic weapons over the last 10 years, with sales skyrocketing last year. And she had a rather stunning exchange with 2 gun CEOs she called on to testify. Take a look.
I want to give you the opportunity now to show personal responsibility. Will you accept personal responsibility for your company's role in this tragedy and apologize to the families of Uvalde?
These acts are committed by murderers. The murderers are responsible.
Reclaiming my time. Mr. Killoy, how about you? Will you apologize to the victims here today and victims around our country and their families in Sutherland Springs, Boulder, and other cities who were harmed by your products?
Well, as I grieve, like all Americans, at these tragic incidences, again, to blame the firearm, the particular firearm in use here that we're talking about, modern sporting rifles.
Thank you.
To blame the firearm as an inanimate object.
Joining me now is the aforementioned Democratic Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney of New York. She's also chair of the House Oversight Committee. Congresswoman, thank you so much for being here. So did this go as you expected? And what did you expect these gun CEOs to say after that question?
I expected them to accept some responsibility for their actions, which they refused to do. After Uvalde and Buffalo and all these mass shootings across the country, the support for assault weapon bans has grown to over 70%. People are demanding action. We passed the bill last night. Thank goodness it's out of the House and into the Senate. But I expected them to accept some responsibility. In our country, most industries track their products. They work to make them safer. They have reports on what's safe and what's not safe. They have failed to do anything. I expected them to act. So if they won't act, Congress will have to make them act. And we are working on legislation to require them to take responsibility, report on their products and the death it's causing and ways to make it safer.
So that leads to what do you see happening next in these hearings? You say you intend to subpoena Smith & Wesson for not showing up to the hearing. Is there more, more where that came from, if you will? It's going out and making sure that these manufacturers come before the Congress to testify to what they're doing and how they're impacting communities with their weapons?
Also at the hearing were the families that have lost loved ones. And they spoke in a tape to them, and they asked them to take responsibility. They asked them to act, and they asked Congress to act. Congress has acted in the House, and we need them to act. There will be future hearings. They're under discussion now. We don't reveal the hearings until we announce them. But we are listening to the American people. They are demanding that we make our country safer, and that means more gun safety and responsibility and steps to protect and help our people. We had over 45,000 people shot in our country in 2020, the last time they kept records on it, and it's out of control. The mass shootings that we have are really only in our country. They're not in other countries. So we need to take steps to make our country safer for our citizens.
To your point, Congresswoman, about how citizens are responding to this, we're seeing laws pop up around the country that allow citizens to sue gun makers, like in California and in Connecticut, where families in Sandy Hook settled with Remington in a suit there. Is it possible to make that legal strategy applicable nationwide so that it's no longer, quote, a local problem and more citizens have that ability to sue gun manufacturers?
Yes, we have a bill before Congress now that we are considering in that direction, and I have literally put in legislation on it too, holding gun companies liable for their actions or allowing them to be held liable. So we are moving forward in many, many directions to make our country safer. It couldn't happen fast enough. the amount of bloodshed, the amount of loss of life and the suffering in our country, and I would say the high cost of gun violence in our country. It has to be addressed, and we are working on it. And we're working on the Inflation Reduction Act.
well, on the assault weapons ban that you and your House colleagues just passed, it's unlikely now that it's going to the Senate to pass in the Senate because Republicans have made it very clear they're done on guns. They're not doing anything else with guns. So moving forward, how do you see breaking that Republican log jam? Is there any way to actually get something like this signed into law?
Well, the first thing you have to do is to hold them responsible with a vote. Let the American people see how the senators vote on banning assault weapons, which they are demanding. And it should then go out into an election. And I believe the American people will vote for people who are for gun safety, for banning these weapons of war. These are not weapons to defend people. They are weapons of war to slaughter people. In one of our hearings, a doctor testified that 5 of his patients had been shot in Uvalde, and the destruction of them was so great that he could not even identify them. He could only identify them from their DNA. So these are not normal weapons. These are machine guns. These are battlefield guns. They don't belong in our schools or in our places of worship or in our communities at all, and we need to ban them. There should be a vote in the Senate, and the American people should hold them responsible at the voting booth.
All right, Democratic Representative Carolyn Maloney of New York, thank you so much for being with us. Coming up, among the many lasting impacts of Russia's devastating war in Ukraine is the effect it is having on children, both inside the country and abroad. After the break, I'll talk to someone who's been on the front lines working with these war-stricken children.